Welcome to the North of Tyne Combined Authority Cabinet meeting. We're here in Newcastle City Centre, but also streaming online. So there are no apologies for absence from Cabinet members, but Councillor Glenn Sanderson is running late, and Robin Fry, who's our VCSE ambassador, has his apologies in as well. Are there any declarations of interest?
Thank you, Chair. It's a standing one, but just to comment under item 12 that I'm a Director of Advanced Northumberland. The report is just to note, but just for the clarity of it, there we are.
Thanks, Richard. And it's worth noting that today ground was broken on the British Volt site up in the old Blythe Power Station site, bringing thousands and thousands of good green jobs to our region. Excellent news for everybody. So let's move on to the substantive items. Item 5 is about the North of Tyne Citizens' Assembly on climate change. This run online because of COVID from March onwards has been completed. The report's summarised. First of all, I'd like to thank the 50 citizens who were involved in this and the oversight panel, the experts involved as well. The last year, 18 months has given us quite an insight into what it's like to live in a disrupted economy, in a disrupted world with the COVID pandemic. But when it comes to climate change, it's something you can't even vaccinate against. So this is something that we have to take very seriously. Thankfully, all three of our local authorities have got robust positions on this, and as we as a combined authority. The work we're doing as a combined authority, all of the jobs we're creating are either directly in those areas where we are decarbonising the economy, or they are in low impact jobs, such as, for example, software development and developing our economy in a low carbon way. The local people involved in this have pooled their ideas, their thoughts of wisdom, and there are a whole series of recommendations. It's notable, these are not my recommendations or the recommendations of any politicians. These are directly from the people of our region. They've come together, they've had access to expert advice, and they've produced a whole series of recommendations. There are 30 recommendations in there. On housing, the focus towards energy improvement and efficiency of new builds. On transport, they're focused on joined up public transport and making walking and cycling easier. In rural areas, obviously there are additional challenges, they have to be met. Lots of recommendations on green energy, particularly uptake of technologies such as solar PV. And there are recommendations on protecting nature and our environment as well, and general recommendations, particularly about raising awareness amongst the public, because there is an element of individual responsibility in this. There's an awareness raising requirement. Now, we have allocated £100,000 under our energy, green growth and climate change blueprint budget that we will be putting into that. We're expanding all of our work in offshore renewables. So from that point of view, there's a lot of work that's going on. We're working together with the North East LEP, with our partners across the region. When I first spoke at the Citizens' Assembly, which I did just to introduce it, and then I wasn't involved, I made it clear that this is a vast problem, and we are not a vast organisation as the North of Tyne Combined Authority. There are those things that we can directly do ourselves. There are those things as the Combined Authority that we can work with partners on across the region. And there will be those recommendations, probably, as said at this time, about which we can do nothing directly, but what we can do is lobby for policy changes or raise awareness. And that triage will come forward. So there are recommendations, and the recommendations in there, obviously it's to thank everybody, which I'm sure we do, but then there is to endorse that collective report. And that report appears in the agenda pack in, now let me get this right, it's box 1 on page 13. And it's not that long, so if you'll indulge me, I'll read it out, because we are being asked to endorse this. It says, "We now see that climate change is a credible, urgent and real threat. It threatens all we value, our families, our communities and our planet. Individuals, communities, businesses and government must all be involved in tackling the climate emergency, putting climate change at the forefront and heart of every single decision. The Assembly urged the North of Tyne Combined Authority and the 3 local authorities of North of Tyne to direct all their departments and committees to consider the effects on climate change in every decision they make, whenever possible choosing the low carbon option. This must be a major priority for our Mayor, who must lead the way and lead by example. In deciding our action, we must place fairness at the centre of ensuring those of us who are vulnerable and marginalised are not further disadvantaged. We must empower and support communities to take urgent, methodical and united action to get to net zero and create an environment in which all life can thrive. We have a responsibility to act urgently and leave a fair legacy to conserve what we have and value now. If we don't act, it will be too late. It's imperative that we speak on behalf of future generations as they have no voice. Our region is one of outstanding beauty, character and a rich history. It's through our community spirit and resilience we will tackle this crisis together. So that's a statement we've been asked to endorse. A note in there, it does ask that the Mayor lead the way by example. And for the benefit of the press, it would be great if you could report that I did arrive here on my bike, as I do, and that I don't own a car. So there is some fantastic work going on in our local authorities. I know that. We recently had our Green Economy Summit. There's fantastic work going along with a lot of our partners. So with that, I will invite any comments or questions. Nick.
Thanks, Jamie. And can I also add my thanks to all of those who were involved in producing this very, very rich report with lots of information in it. It is extremely interesting. And one of the things that we'll all have to do as respective authorities is take it away, digest it, look at the things that we're doing and check whether the recommendations here are in alignment. Because, of course, as you just said, we've all got a significant amount of work going on in our respective authorities. I think the Citizens' Assembly is significant because it's the third of the actions that are asked of politicians by those who campaign on climate change. The first is to tell the truth, and the evidence is increasingly clear. The second is to work cross-party, and certainly we're doing that in Newcastle, and I know our other authorities are working cross-party to ensure that as much as possible, the actions that we take on climate change are depoliticised and that we build community and political support for them rather than see them as a political divide between elected politicians. And then, of course, the Citizens' Assembly provides us with very, very rich information to move forward. And I think, as you said in your introduction, Jamie, climate change can sometimes feel to people like a threat and sometimes people can feel that doing things around climate change can be about taking things away from people. But what this report suggests, and what we know from our experience, is that it is probably our region's single greatest opportunity for job creation that we've had in several generations. And if we're able to seize the opportunity here and make the North of Tyne area an absolutely world-class place for green technology in all of the ranges in which it can be applied across all areas of daily living and activities, then I think we have something really quite special here. To do that, we need both resources, and of course we've got COP26 coming up, and we're looking to our national government to align their budget and comprehensive spending review around our net zero ambitions and priorities, but we're also going to have to leverage in significant amounts of private finance, which is going to be a challenge because that's going to mean different financial instruments, managing different levels of risk. It means that we have to find ways in which we can demonstrate that what we're doing is effective and adds value. And much of the work of our councils at the moment around the climate change agenda is developing an evidence base about what interventions bring the sharpest reductions in carbon output in the shortest period of time. And we certainly have a whole string of projects in Newcastle and initiatives and interventions that some of which we're already funding, some of which we're applying for funding for, some of which we haven't yet got funding for, but we are hopeful of that in the future. And I think that in addition to the promotional work that the Combined Authority can do, continuing to help us with that enabling and leveraging of money, that pump priming, that match funding, will be really important for the future. And the final thing that I'll say, if I may, Chair, is that we shouldn't see this as something for future generations. It's for us and for now. And that means that we need to be thinking about how we can retrain people at every age to do the new jobs of the future that are going to be broadly associated with the low carbon economy. And to do that, we need the government to really devolve skills funding to us in a comprehensive way so that we can come up with a proper plan with business and our communities to get the very best out of every pound that we spend on skills in the future. And this is, I think, an extraordinary opportunity to make sure that not only are we training people who are going through the education system now to do these jobs, but we're putting in place support for people who may lose their jobs in other parts of the economy to do the jobs that we're creating through our work on the green economy. So this is a hugely exciting agenda, a very, very exciting time for us here in North of Tyne. And I think the Citizens Assembly report provides us with a huge amount of detailed information that is of huge value as we move to the next stage of our work on tackling the climate emergency.
Nick, thank you. I'm not even going to pick up any specific points because that was all so eloquent and well said. Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. This paper is so welcome. We've discussed it, as you know, Chair, on probably the last 4 or 5 LEP board meetings, and you will have heard there the degree of urgency that was being pressed upon us by the private sector board members of the LEP and the need for urgency. So it's great to see the action being taken here. And I think what I take from this paper is the need for the partnership working. It was great to see the reference in the appendices to the North East Energy for Growth strategy. That builds to the point that Nick and you have made, Chair, about creating the skills and the talent for the new jobs that will emerge in this in the future. But it's a partnership piece, and as you know, the LEP wants to play its part in that partnership. It's for all of us. We need to work in partnership with the local authorities and the combined authority to make this happen. There is so much to do, so much resource needed, in, not just in money, but in terms of our own energy bringing this to this agenda. So we very much welcome it and look forward to working with you and remain very committed to this and look forward to the update on the actions at our next LEP board meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. And thanks for all your support and work with the LEP in terms of bringing the business community on board. It's surprising. So it's not surprising, it's encouraging how many people are actually rolling the sleeves up and doing this, which echoes Nick's point about that it does need leadership. We need the leadership from national government, but it cannot be left to national government. It's the only way it's going to happen is if everybody gets involved. It's hard to overstate how urgent this is. Has anybody else like to? Richard.
Thank you, Jamie. And first of all, congratulations for getting on your bike on behalf of climate change. I'm sure I might have wound you up in the past a little bit about other modes of transport, but it's excellent to see and happy to come here in my electric car as well. In terms of just how we think about this, we've all had the chance to spend probably a lot more time at home than we would have thought. And I was watching a speech by an American president the other day. I wouldn't say which one to keep it political. But he was noting that he'd been asked to write a note for a time capsule. And he was writing about the problems and the situation that he was finding himself in at that time, which of course was all around what was mankind was about to potentially obliterate itself in the form of the threat of nuclear war. And we all sit here now in a very similar situation. And in 100 years, when we write a note, the question is going to be, what are the people who are reading that note going to make of our actions and what we did here? And that's why it's a different topic, but it's absolutely essential that we get it right. And I think that what we've got in the paper and the work that's been going on at the Combined Authority is just that. It's about setting a course to make sure that when we look to future generations, that we can look them in the face and say that we did all that we could. I note in this report that we've got the potential in the autumn, if I'm understanding correctly, for the 3 constituent local authorities to provide some feedback on what it is that they're doing at a local level. And that's really important, because we can't be a talking shop, and we're not. And that will be the opportunity for the 3 authorities to identify that work that's going on. And as I mentioned when I arrived just before the meeting, and you've mentioned also, I've just left the site of British Volt up at Camas, where they're looking at, well, they've just broken ground for their gigafactory. That's a huge achievement for the North East, for Northumberland, for the combined authority to attract that investment here. And we're seeing something similar happen potentially at Nissan. We must use this opportunity, this green revolution, which the North East is, and particularly the north of Tyne, is really well placed to take advantage of in terms of jobs, in terms of levelling up, in terms of making sure that we have a sustainable future, to get that supply chain, to get that, to make sure, as I was hearing on the call with the LEP the other day, that we've got that workforce ready and able and willing to take part in that. I look forward in a little while to talking on some of the things that the authority is doing in a practical way as well. But thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard. It's interesting you used that analogy about nuclear war, because at that time it was about world leaders stepping back from pressing a button. The reality with climate change is the missiles are already in flight, and we've got to turn them around, because we are already producing unsustainable levels of emissions that are going to destroy our civilization. Norma, on that happy note.
Thank you, Chair. I too welcome this report, to be quite honest, and it is an excellent report, I have to say, but it worries me in the fact that there's lots and lots of excellent reports are actually produced and they go on the shelf, right? I just hope we can work together and make things happen in this area, to be quite honest, because the residents and the people of this area depend upon what happens in this agenda. There is tremendous potential, which has been addressed and spoken about right across the board, but don't let us forget about this and let our residents down. This is the future. There is no doubt about it. So I welcome this, and thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Norma. That's a really strong message, and that echoes Nick's point that this is actually an opportunity in so many ways. It's a pretty awesome responsibility that we've got with our current generation. You know, we find ourselves in leadership positions, but we can at the same time also start to address poverty, people being left behind, because often the causes are the same, and we really can move towards that zero carbon, zero poverty northeast that we all want to see. I can't see anyone else indicating, so let's move on to the specific recommendations. First of all, obviously, is to thank all those who participated, including the oversight panel and the expert commentators. And from the comments, then that is quite clearly agreed. Second is to receive the report and endorse the collective statement, which I read out earlier. That's in box 1 on page 13. And I can see people nodding, so that's agreed. Third is to endorse the collaboration between the North of Tyne Combined Authority and our local authorities to jointly respond to the recommendations and develop project proposals, including all the things listed there that we are already underway with: North of Tyne Clean Energy, Green Growth, Climate Change Blueprint, and local authority climate plans. So just a quick nod to get that agreed. Yep, thank you. And fourth is to agree to receive a detailed report in autumn from our team to look at in detail how we intend to work with all of these things, as Richard was describing earlier, and wider regional stakeholders, as Lucy was talking about, and respond to the recommendations of the Citizens' Assembly in detail. And I can see people nodding. So that's agreed. Thank you very much. A brief detail, we'll go back to the previous item on the minutes, because in my excitement about the Citizens' Assembly report, I've read through the minutes, look all right to me. Is everybody happy to agree them as a true record? Thank you. Okay, so this moves us on to item number 6. This is about co-production. The North of Tyne Scrutiny Panel have been doing some work on co-production. Co-production is embedded in everything we do at the North of Tyne. It's often said that politicians are distant, that bureaucracies don't deal well with people. There may be some truth in that in some cases. I'm sure we've all got personal experiences, but at the North of Tyne we've embedded in it, and thankfully we have an excellent relationship with our Overview and Scrutiny Panel, and I certainly did with the former chair, hoping to repeat that. And so Councillor Seymour is going to introduce the recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to be here, and it was an honour to be elected as chair of the Combined Authorities Overview and Scrutiny Committee recently in June. And with pleasure, I present to Cabinet the work undertaken during the previous municipal year by the committee's co-production working group. You will have read the report as item 6, with its findings and recommendations that I support, as we are nothing without our residents, and the North of Tyne area has a full range of residents, and all of their views and ambitions are important and valuable to us. The working group was established at the February 2021 meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and met on a number of occasions prior to the 2021 annual meeting. A total of 5 members covering all 3 constituent authorities served on the working group. I would like to thank Linda Wright, Vice Chair of the Scrutiny Committee, Gregor Roughhead, former Chair of the Scrutiny Committee, Sandra Graham, Gordon Stewart, and the late Anita Lauer for serving on the working group, and thank them for their recommendations. On behalf of the committee, I would also like to thank Elizabeth Kerr for providing secretary support to the working group, and the following officers for assisting with the study: Ruth Redfern, Director of Policy and Performance, Lee Mills, Adrian Doherty, Rhiannon Byrne. The committee considers that the combined authority is being guided by good principles and genuinely wants to increase participation and involvement with our residents, partners, businesses, and key stakeholders, and believe its recommendations would begin the process of embedding co-production principles within the organisation. Any co-production work must be meaningful and be given the priority and the time it may need. And I'd like to read out the 3 recommendations as follows. 1, to create and deliver a programme of information sharing and awareness raising on the different approaches to engaging with residents, partners and colleagues on the ladder of participation and co-production for the whole NTCA officer team. 2, utilising the ladder of engagement develops guidance for officers to use when beginning work on a project or plan, which allows them to positively identify the most appropriate participation approach for the topic. And 3, develops a co-production network to identify appropriate groups of people to enable the involvement of harder to reach groups in the work of the NTCA and its constituent authorities. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to present the report today. I do hope Cabinet accepts and agrees to the recommendations from the working group. And finally, as chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, I very much look forward to working productively with Cabinet members and senior officers, and I endeavour to continue and maintain the effective executive scrutiny relationship established by my predecessor, Gregor Roughhead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Seymour. So would Councillor Kilgour like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. I really welcome this report. Of course, co-production isn't new in nature. As elected representatives, we've always sought to listen and engage with our communities and our residents. But what is new is both the challenges we face and the need to do things differently. And I welcome the move away from our traditional understanding of service users to one that defines our residents as collaborators and participants. This idea takes us away from a patriarchal and top-down approach where we define what's right for someone and moves us towards doing what is right together. Councils and combined authorities in partnership with our communities, in simple terms, doing things with residents and not to them. I do think this is the right approach for North of Tyne, not just ideologically, but also because it's about getting things right the first time. It's about doing our job well and often doing it more cost effectively. Our residents are not passive recipients of help. Our communities are partners and allies in the recovery from this pandemic. Excuse me. The redesign of what we do and how we do it is vital and must be done with our communities, not to them. And yes, initially it will take longer. Listening to people and working with them often does, but the benefits can be huge. In my short time as a member of this cabinet, I've been struck by the way government funding is released, constructed on a timescale and packaged in a way that inevitably seems to discourage engagement, let alone co-production. As we enter discussions about post-European funding and levelling up, I urge the Mayor and colleagues around the table to continue to campaign for a single pot of money from government, not a series of short-term packages that are pre-designed and predisposed to equally short-term gains. If we are to truly co-produce, we need the freedom to do so. Our residents, our businesses and our communities are the real experts, and we must listen to them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Karen. Just in responding to this request, it's very often seen that there is a gap between those who are in government, which we all are, and the people who we are elected to serve. And I'm always of the opinion that it's better to let the teachers work out how to teach, how the doctors to practice medicine, and when you are dealing with recipients of services, to take their opinions on board. And it's often hard to do, especially with timescales and deadlines. But if you embed it at the beginning, it's a lot easier, because you have to take people with you. And it doesn't matter what we're talking about, whether it's economic development, whether it's public health, whatever else it is, we know that people basically have a habit of doing whatever they want to do. So it's far better to get their wisdom and involvement early and to develop things with them. That's the essence of co-production. Now, there's 3 specific recommendations in there, which I support all of them. But this is about relationships, ultimately. And building relationships. As I said earlier, we've had an excellent relationship with Overview and Scrutiny. I'm often struck by, when it comes to ideas, particularly in politics, people want something to be their idea and take the credit for it. I love it when I have an idea and find out that somebody else is already doing it, because it saves me a lot less work. I love it if I have an idea and other people want to do it and take it on, because it's us all pulling together that we to do it. That is the whole point of co-production. And at the North of Tyne, we're already putting £80,000 into our Poverty Truth Commission. We've spoken earlier about our Citizens' Assembly on climate change. The work that's being done on economic support for victims of domestic abuse has been done by the team directly by engaging with those people. This morning, we've got an item later on the agenda about developing high streets. This morning I was talking to the Independent Retailers Association, and what you find is if you talk to the people who are doing the job, they know a great deal about it. It's very foolish not to listen to them. So I heartily support these recommendations. Anybody else got anything they would like to add? No, thank you. Right, well, let's run to the recommendations. Councillor Seymour read them out earlier, so it's just to consider and note the report, and whether to accept the points as made in the report. And I can see lots of nodding there. So that's agreed. Thank you. Thank you very much. So let's move on to item number 7. That's the North Bank of the Tyne Growth Corridor. This is really quite an exciting one. So I'll hand straight over to Richard.
Thank you very much, Chair. So today we're sat in undoubtedly the greatest city in the UK and probably in the world. Let's face it. But it would be a city and a combined authority that wouldn't be here if it wasn't for one thing, and that is the River Tyne that is at the centre, at the heart of our wide community. Rivers connect people, and the Tyne is no different in that sense to other great rivers. It's a place that inspires us, it sustains us, it ties in with our culture, our values, and our way of life. And it gives a sense of place as well. And the River Tyne is, as I say, an iconic place, an ever symbol of the region's past, and is fundamental to our economic future as well. It supports and is supporting industrial growth. It will help us transition to net zero in the years to come. And it provides new houses opportunities, new job opportunities and opportunities to develop our skills as a society. The river is a massive asset and it's important to all of our people. It already supports thousands of jobs, and the authority has been very clear about the need to be proactive in protecting the river as an asset and unlocking its potential for the future. Now, going on to the subject of the report, we've already, as an authority, started to make great progress in the Northumberland Line economic corridor. And that's really going to be a fundamental part of transforming our economy, in particular in the southeast of the authority. The next bit, logically, is to look at the River Tyne, and in this instance, bring forward a North Bank economic corridor and a study that will support that in the coming weeks. And this will show how we can unlock the potential for that corridor. We know we need to maximise the potential for the existing assets that we have here, but as well to remove barriers to additional and future investment. And we know already, or have a good idea of what those are, but we will need to make sure that this report elaborates on those. This includes, just to give a flavour, safeguarding future operational berths, which are going to be critical for deployment of offshore renewables in the years to come. But also there's a potential for public sector and education institutions to prepare and support residents for the employment opportunities that will bring for all of our residents who wish to access it. We must, it's important to say, as a Northumberland politician, make sure that when we're doing that work, that we're making sure that we have the strong link between the Blythe and the Tyne, and the fantastic assets that are available. For example, the catapult at the Blythe estuary, but a whole host of other businesses that are within that wider ecosystem that we are very fortunate to have here. So today we're proposing to establish a targeted task force as part of this work, providing joined-up leadership and strengthening cross-sector collaboration, which I've found really important in terms of the work that we've been doing locally within Northumberland Council in Blythe. Often you really just need to get people in a room and make sure that they're all talking to each other, they're all pointed in the same direction, and they understand what the wider vision is, and this will help us to do that. And this will be supported by a technical capacity fund to enable rapid business case development and projects on the north bank of the Tyne. And again, this is something that's really critical because you never know what pot of money is going to become available from government. But ultimately, fortune favours the brave when it comes to these sorts of things. And if you've got a good plan, then invariably, wherever you look, you will find some backing for it in some way, shape or form. And this will allow us to provide that vision and to demonstrate to government that we're ready and willing and able to be part of creating something exciting in the offshore industry. That task force will deliberately take on an external facing and be inclusive in terms of its perspective. And in that sense, we're inviting everybody to play a part in that who feels that they're able. Above all, we want to be bold, ambitious and tenacious. We can't and we won't ignore the potential that we have on the Tyne to be part of this huge revolution that's going to go on with offshore industry, and in particular with offshore wind. We must engage, we must listen to the people who are going to be able to drive that forward with us in partnership. And I recommend the report to the Cabinet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. Again, a great paper to read, and very pertinent for me particularly because yesterday morning I spent 3 hours down on these particular sites with firstly Shepherd's Offshore, then Baker Hughes, and then Technic FMC, and these were businesses that you'll be very familiar with. And these are international businesses, so it was good to hear you, Richard, talk about how important it is that we keep the 3 constituent members close and we all benefit. But we must also lift our heads and remember about the international opportunities that these businesses, and I named just 3, but there's a whole string more there, working really collaboratively together, competing in very tough markets in Mexico and Brazil and South America and India and so on. And I think it's really important that we keep businesses like that. I don't know who you have in mind for the task force, but we keep them very close because they're the people who are really driving this. They're the people who are creating the new technology, which is just outstanding. If you haven't had a chance to go and look at it, it's breathtaking what's going on there. And they're the people who will keep those international links and keep reminding the world that the North East is the centre of excellence here. So I really suppose I put the plea for the private sector voice in this discussion, but it's a great paper to see, and I know again the private sector board members of the LEP would be pleased to lend support to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Nick.
Just to add very briefly, I think this is a great example of the innovation of the businesses on the north bank of the Tyne. Rather than simply allowing opportunities to pass them by, they've spotted new opportunities in offshore wind in particular, and I think we have a responsibility to support them to grow the sector, grow the skills base, and grow further opportunities. And I know that there's very strong collaboration between Newcastle and North Tyneside on the north bank of the Tyne, and it's already created several thousands of jobs, and by helping out with this facilitative approach, I think we're adding value to an existing important economic sector, which marks us out as unique. Just to refer back to the previous report around climate change, this is one of the things that we can make a real difference around. And I know that the businesses are up for it. It's good that we're up for it too, and I'm very supportive of the recommendations here.
Thank you. Norma.
Well, you'd imagine I find this report extremely exciting, to be quite honest. And it just follows on from what we're talking about with the Green Agenda. As someone who's very closely linked with places like Wallsend, Walker and Newcastle, I have to tell you that this is about hope for the residents all around the north of the Tyne. And people are important. Those people have suffered for a long, long time. Second and third generations of unemployment. Difficult times. And here is actually a fantastic opportunity to give hope to those people. And it actually goes deep inside of me, because I work very closely with many of those people, and to give them opportunities, jobs, and at the same time new skills, give them some inner pride and some dignity about being able to care for their families and their local people as well. So all I'm going to say is to you that this is excellent. This is a fantastic report. Don't let it go. Please don't let it go. And I'm quite happy about supporting Northumberland and the Blythe River, because this is part of our future. This is definitely part of our future. So I welcome it, to be quite honest. And I just hope that this gets a lot of publicity, because I want to be around when the people going to the supermarket hear about this. They will have that actually excitement that things are going to happen again, and their towns will become busy again and brisk, and things will happen for them and their families. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Norma. I mean, that's really heartfelt. I couldn't agree more. it's interesting that when we're talking about the Citizens' Assembly on climate change, that Nick raised the point of needing private sector investment, because that is where the vast amount of the money is, which is exactly Lucy's point. And that's why we've engaged with the businesses, and Shepherd's are a major facilitator, and I'm not going to try and list all of the partners involved because I'll inevitably forget one of them. But it's about the skills, it's about the supply chain, it's about us doing the things that no individual business can do. It's very facilitative, and it is a key thing. Now, I moved to Tyneside more than 30 years ago now and spent a lot of time in Wall's End. At the time, Swan Hunters was open, and you used to see loads of people walking down the road to the shipyard in those days. And I remember that shipyard closing. And talking about making sure we get the publicity for this, Norma, I would love the day when we have people, when we have engineering jobs created on that old Swan site, being there, announcing it to the rest of the world that we're open for business. That would be a very proud day for all of us. So this is fantastic. It's about net zero. It's about closing the loop. And it's about remembering that the Tyne is a river and not a sea. It is about working with partners across the region, particularly obviously the Blythe and the supply chain there, and the skills from, like I say, across the region. And I'm going to spare you the singing, but it does always brings to mind when we talk about the North Bank of the Tyne, the Sting song, All This Time. So we'll see, we'll send him an email and see if he's happy to waive the rights, and we can start to use that in some publicity material. Well, I know there's at least one musician amongst us, so perhaps we'll record our own cover version. This is a wonderful report, in my opinion, and seemingly everybody else's, which is good. So we'll move on to the recommendations. Obviously, we note the contents of the report. So the second recommendation is to authorise the head of paid service and ergo the rest of the team to work with other stakeholders, which is agreed. I can see the nodding. Agree an allocation of up to 500,000 from the NTCA Investment Fund. That's to establish the Technical Capacity Fund, which Richard developed in a little bit of detail. So that's agreed, yes. And fourth is to authorise the head of paid service in consultation with the investment panel, mayor and portfolio holders to make the necessary details and business cases for that. Is that agreed? Excellent, thank you. Yet again, we come up to another quite interesting and exciting one. This is Richard again. This is about digital connectivity. It's such a key area, and we've already done a lot in the North of Tyne on this. But if anything, as we've learned from the last year, it's that without digital connectivity, the world would be a very, very different place. It's hard to imagine what the pandemic would have been like without digital connectivity. But we've got to go so much further. We've had a lot of people excluded. But with that, I'm going to hand over to Richard.
Thank you very much, Jamie. It's a great pleasure to introduce another exciting report, I have to say. Looking at this whole sort of space, I mean, the pandemic has accelerated existing trends that we were observing, but at a pace that probably would be unimaginable without the effect of COVID. There are possibilities for our economy in 2022, which might have seemed a decade or decades away just before COVID struck. Companies have digitized their activities rapidly. We've all been used to sitting on Zoom meetings and team meetings and Skype meetings and every other form of virtual meeting that you can virtually imagine. For the most part, it's been a relatively pleasant experience, not always, as we all know. But there's so much more going on in our industries than that, and it's really been interesting to watch. 1 in every 5 working days is expected to move to home working after the pandemic ends, or as we approach a point where we'll be at least able to live with try with that one. Excellent. For the purposes of any recording or anybody watching, I don't think you probably missed much in one of my speeches, but you'll be fine, I'm sure. So, we're revolutionising the way that we work, and as we call for greener lifestyles and less travel, digitization is going to move hugely up the agenda as we progress, and all our three authorities need to prepare for that in the way that we say. We have some of the same challenges across all of our areas, and we're confident that we can deliver solutions. We're already ahead of the game in terms of the investment that we have made or are making in terms of rural internet connectivity, digital adoption and business growth, and data analysis. Our local full fibre network programme is continuing over 170 public sites, for example, in rural Northumberland, including connecting many schools and public buildings. There are plans for a further 300 sites or so in the area to be connected, at least 2,000 premises. Over 3,000 residents are more digitally connected because of COVID response investment and the kit and the skills and the connectivity that we've been able to put in place. Whilst we celebrate how much we've achieved, we need to go further and faster if we're to make sure that we're at the forefront of this change. The next change and the next stage will be to create a 5G and future connectivity program, and this can be a real game changer for our communities. Creating faster market investment in infrastructure and connectivity, and supporting industry-led innovation in this space. We will give real incentives for mobile networks and infrastructure providers to roll out super-fast wireless and fibre across our local authorities. And I would urge providers to get in touch if they feel that they can provide some part of that and assist us in those aims. We want to make sure that and ensure that we have robust internet connections, not like my internet connection that goes off at 1 minute past 8 every night whilst I'm watching Netflix, and I have to go back and in and out until it comes back, but we're getting there. We want that robust connectivity, of course, for remote working, for connected public services, and to allow us to grow our digital and tech industries, of which we're home to many thriving companies already, and we want them to grow and to become stronger. Marketing this region as a place for the future, for our forward look, our inherent investability, and a fantastic place to live and study and work. You won't have to be on the train or continually in London to take advantage of this. It's a great opportunity and a leveller for our region. And for the North of Tyne in particular. In the years ahead, the power of digital solutions can help countless businesses emerge from the COVID crisis and change the way they work and operate. And it can drive our recovery from COVID. From artificial intelligence to data clouds, from digital innovation hubs to deep tech startups, and I've learnt some new names in amongst this paper. For innovation, growth, productivity and technology, all of this will go hand in hand. And I'm very pleased to recommend this report after a great deal of hard work by your officers as well, I have to say. I've been really impressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. That's really nice to hear. Has anybody got any questions for Richard? Well, just to make some comments, by way of an illustration, it'd be about 2 years ago now, I was up helping the broadband for the Allen Valleys, which is a community project in Northumberland that connects. The market was never going to be investing in connecting the farms and so on around there. And they get together with their diggers and they lay the pipelines and the things like that. I was chatting to a guy up there, and he's got an office in Gateshead and he does video production. And he'd set it away in the old-fashioned telephone line broadband, and it had fallen over, and he woke up the next day and he had a deadline to get it there by noon. And so rather than try it again, he got in his car He drove to Gateshead to upload it there and then drove back out to the Allen Valleys. That's the difference that it makes about having good digital connectivity. We've heard through our Inclusive Economy Board about digital exclusion, and we've done work in terms of providing laptops to people. But the North East in particular has the lowest level of highly skilled digital users, internet users. So it's one thing to be able to, post on Facebook. It's quite another to have the confidence to engage with government websites to access your services or pay your taxes. And there's a recurring theme through everything we're doing today that, of course, this is about a greener economy. Connectivity does not necessarily involve moving people and vehicles about. Interesting you mentioned Netflix there, Richard, because I've just watched the Matrix films with my kids when I was off last week. So I don't think we're going to get quite that level of connectivity, but it is interesting to see that some of the ideas and innovations about the future, because this is about leverage. When we're talking about 5G in particular, the bandwidth is so huge that they are very different. So there's a lot of medical applications, including in-home scanning for people, as we're increasingly elderly population. The ability to get that much bandwidth around is necessary. You need higher than we have currently, and these applications are coming. It's about making sure that we are leveraging in, because we're talking about a £7 million allocation here. The overall cost of this stuff runs into hundreds of millions or billions. We're not talking about funding it, we're talking about leveraging it, about being very careful and strategic in what we're doing, about developing test facilities, about encouraging people to do their pilots and development here so that we are strategically placed to get the jobs that follow on from it first. There's the Stelium data centre near Cobalt. And when talking to John about that, he was saying that, look, we just put this in. We don't have to come up with the end user ideas about it. The market will do that. This is about creating the situations. Talking to Arkinova up in Ananic, they're a biotech company, but they were telling me that they're primarily a data company because the amount of data that goes into developing, for example, vaccines is huge. And they were having difficulty. So this is the infrastructure that underpins everything else we're talking about. And with that, we'll move on to the recommendations. So to know the contents of the report, which I take as read, to endorse the headline allocation of £7 million to support the delivery of the priorities in the report. Is that agreed? That's agreed, thank you. To authorise the head of paid service to take the necessary steps as laid out, including consultation with the investment panel, portfolio holder Richard and the mayor, me, is that agreed? Thank you. And to authorise the head of paid service and monitoring officer to complete the necessary documentation. And I can see heads nodding, so that's agreed. Thank you very much. And as if that wasn't enough, we're going to move on to item 9, which is the investment fund update, which again has a lot of very chunky, very real investments. And I'm going to hand over to Carl.
Thank you, Chair. We've all seen growing signs of economic recovery. Independent forecasters are expecting rapid economic growth over the remainder of this year and into 2022. But I will share to you today my concern about 3 areas. The risk of the impact of removal of restrictions, businesses reporting that they are financially fragile, and uneven recovery and the growing inequality between those who are recovering and those who are not. It is therefore essential that we intervene where only we can, to prevent a divided economy and divided communities. Since we met in June, we've approved a further £6 million, bringing the total value of committed spend to 68 million against 71 live contracts. The number of jobs created for the North Tyne Combined Authority investment has more than doubled over the last month to 380 new roles. And I look forward to get more projects in the next few months on skills, offshore infrastructure, housing and child poverty prevention. I particularly welcome my colleague Councillor Wearmore's initiatives to support digital infrastructure and connectivity to unlock the potentials opportunities along the north bank of the Tyne, which is certainly close to my heart, having grown up there. In March 21, this Cabinet set out opportunity of healthy ageing and highlighted the opportunity to build an ageing economy cluster of research, business, industry and ideas. For people with great ideas and new products to create, test and turn these innovations into economic value here in the north of the Tyne and export them nationally and globally. I'm delighted to announce that the National Innovation Centre for Ageing has proposed an Ageing Economy Cluster Development Project building market intelligence, identifying new businesses in the north of the Tyne, potential to adapt or innovate to better meet the needs of older consumers. When a comprehensive programme of activities to engage the sector, build market that's the same what I just said. Potential to adapt and meet next opportunities. The National Innovation Centre for Ageing further extends our partnership with the University of Newcastle and regarded as a unique national asset. 600 businesses supporting 140 new jobs, all in co-production with 1,000 residents. We're innovating in a world that's changing. We're also working with Northumbria University, some of the UK's leading publishing houses, and New Writing North to create a new centre for writing and publishing. Literature and publishing are key priorities for our culture and creative industries, and we hope that it will refurbish historic retail property. We all know the challenges facing the high street, the inevitable rise in the internet purchases, but local businesses have provided a lifeline during the pandemic as more people have lived and worked locally. So we're developing a second element of our innovation recovery deal to support the evolution of our towns and high streets. We need to support the establishment of local independent traders, which in turn support our towns and high streets, ensuring we promote our places and receive funding for their recovery. From the Union Learn project to Space Hive, from 2 further housing sites in brownfield housing to increasing inward investment, from skills to businesses, growth and jobs. We're making a difference. Finally, I'd like to commend the team for submitting a proposal to government for 8.9 million from the UK Community Renewal Fund, almost exactly in line with 9 million maximum which could be sought. We're a combined authority investing in skills, ageing and technology. We're a combined authority supporting affordable homes. We're a combined authority ensuring that people don't have to leave their hometown for a good job. The North of Tyne is the best place to grow up in and the best place to grow up in. I recommend this report to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Has anybody got any questions or comments on the report? Norma.
I just welcome the report. This is a really exciting afternoon, is it not? All this good news is coming forward, to be quite honest. The people we serve are going to be really excited when they find out about all this. But one of the things that I really think is important in this, apart from all the money you're giving to help them to grow and develop, is the fact that we need to bring our high streets back to life, don't we? Because that's the places where our people meet, they have their coffee, they have their chat, they see their relatives, to be quite honest. And there's nothing worse than going out shopping and going along the high street that's dead, uninviting, nowhere to sit, nowhere to have the chat. But more importantly, we need to actually support those small businesses to come into those high streets, those unique little businesses that sell quite different things, but are very, very attractive to residents. Businesses that offer a service, businesses that, as well as offering a service, say, come and see us, have a chat, do have a coffee. So I think there's lots of opportunities. The report is great, okay, but I'm quite excited about how we can change our awful high streets into something that actually our residents can be proud of. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Norma. That's beautifully put about the high streets. You're absolutely right. And it is that mix. We know that it's not going to be the case as it was when I was growing up, that every building on the high street is a shop. There are going to be leisure there. There's going to be opportunities, social things, education, to really make this a place where people want to go and also support that real variation and diversity so that it's not the same. We don't want every high street the same in every town and city. We want that variation. The report covers quite a lot. In particular, one of the things on there is about allocating £1.3 million from the investment fund to strengthen the inward investment pipeline. Our inward investment has been very successful so far. Very early on in my tenure, met with Verisure, along with Bruce, former cabinet member, and we managed to persuade Verisure to land, and they're already there with those jobs. And interestingly, the numbers that Carl's give of jobs created, they're reported in arrears. So the actual number is much higher. So it can be often as long as 9 months before those jobs figures come through. And we are so far ahead of the target that we were given in the Devo deal. It is untrue. We're doing a fantastic job on that. Not only have we brought Verisure here, we've brought Explore here in Newcastle. They've already filled the vast majority of their posts. And I'm pleased to say I've signed off, because this often happens quite quickly, 2 more delegated decisions. And I'm not going to give the details, because people will be wanting to do their own announcements. But each bring in respectively 100 and another 94 very high quality jobs here. And they're going to be filled in the next year. So this is fantastic. That all totals up to 4,193 jobs and another 2,673 safeguarded. Given the economic times we've been through, I think that's pretty impressive over the last 2 years. The digital jobs that are outlined in the report, the publishing, these are the sort of things that are a low carbon economy. It's not all just about wind turbines and electric batteries. It's making sure we can create high value jobs across the spectrum for people. And part of that, of course, is exactly as Norma says, is developing places where people can go and spend the money that they're earning from their well-paid jobs and supporting more jobs, which is why I'm so keen to be supporting independent, regionally based businesses that spend their money here. Talking to a guy who used to be at Newcastle Breweries, he was saying that they would always, when they were fitting out a pub, they would always try and get a local firm to do the fit out. And the way he described it, he says, because those guys are going to come and buy their beer in my pub. And it is, I think that's just a wonderful way of explaining the circular economy. So let's move on to the recommendations. So we note the progress, unless anyone objects. So, and then 2, quite significant, £5.14 million to the digital ecosystem projects as described in section 1.3. I can see lots of nods there, thank you. Approve a funding of £200,000 for ongoing promotion of that programme as described in recommendation 3. You can see nods for that. Number 4, this is about the high streets, to allocate funding of £1 million to support a town and high street recovery, and this will need us to develop a common set of programmes across the combined authority. So that's agreed, I can see that. Number 5, a very specific amount of £199,990 for supporting New Writing North, and that's quite a detailed case behind that and a lot of partners, so that I can see that's agreed. I can see people nodding. Number 6, an allocation of £1.3 million for the NTCA Investment Fund as described there, and this is about leveraging in all of the work we're already doing on our Inward Investment Fund. And again, I can see people nodding on this, that's agreed. And number 7 is to authorise the Head of Paid Service and Monitoring Officer to complete the necessary documentation. And that's all agreed. So thank you. So exactly as Norma said, it's been a very exciting afternoon. And we're spending money and getting results at the same time, which is the holy grail of governance, isn't it? So let's move on to item number 10, which is about the Inclusive Economy Innovation Fund and the board update. And I'll hand straight over to Karen.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not quite sure I can continue with the excitement. My apologies if it all calms down a bit now. I spoke at our last meeting on child poverty and our emerging work programme designed in partnership with the Inclusive Economy Board. Today I'm presenting our progress on the board and the Inclusive Economy Innovation Fund and how we intend to ensure all of the people of the North of Tyne benefit from our recovering economy. Since March 2020, the Inclusive Economy Board has not only driven the completion of our employability framework with the DWP, promoted and tested the Good Work Pledge, and shaped our responses to Kickstart and the development of our apprenticeship hub, but they've also started real and tangible collaborations on those issues we really need to tackle together: digital inclusion, rural resilience, which is quite difficult to say, and dramatically reducing poverty. Through our independent chair, the Right Reverend Bishop Christian Hardman, we have been heard in the House of Lords. We have a strong media and national profile, and this combined authority is growing a reputation for our work on economic inclusion. We are ahead of the game, and it is the right time to seek yet more partners. Like everyone around this table, I was appalled and angered by the recent racism shown to English sportsmen and women from the men's football game through to drivers in the Grand Prix. I despaired that national and international politics and events had led us to a place where a vocal minority felt able to air such vile views. But I also saw the millions of responses from individuals and organisations who condemned that racist abuse and who believe, as I do, that equality and fairness are a prerequisite for a civilised society. And it's in this context that we will be asking partners and stakeholders to join with us in matching some of our interventions in the Inclusive Economy Innovation Fund. But it's not enough to condemn. We must act. We are designing a fund that invites businesses, organisations, charitable trusts, social investors, and all those who believe in our mission and vision for a fairer and more equal society to join with us to develop projects and interventions that truly make a difference, and to create a North of Tyne that is fair, equal, and harmonious. The Inclusive Economy Innovation Fund will support our inclusive economy ambitions, maximising the value of combined authority funding and creating a coalition of committed co-investors tackling inequality across the North of Tyne. Building a fund which supports good jobs and work opportunities and tackles in-work poverty, directly targeting poorer communities, families and individuals. And if anyone watching this meeting or reading about it would like to join us and feels they could make a financial contribution, then please, I urge you to contact us, become a partner and make a difference. We will be launching this fund in the next few weeks. On the Inclusive Economy Board, we have some new faces, and I'm delighted that Marianne, Victor and Katie will be joining us. We will no doubt develop and grow our membership in the next year, and I hope Cabinet will agree to delegate the authority to make in-year changes. Our Inclusive Economy Board is a game changer. Our partners on the board have a voice, they have influence, but most of all, they are a reminder to us on this Cabinet that we must never forget our inclusive economy ambitions in every project, in every programme, in everything we do. I think that these partnerships are effective catalysts to improve life chances, to unleash the potential of people and communities, and create the fairer, more inclusive North of Tyne that we all want. And I recommend the report to Cabinet.
Thank you, Karen. Has anybody got any questions for Karen about the report? Or comments? By all means, Norma.
I just want to say, Karen, that I welcome this report. I think it might not seem as exciting as some of the things we've talked about, but to me it is, because as a combined authority, we are actually considering every resident. And it's important to know that in this area, every resident matters. So it is exciting to me, Karen. And I think this is a really nice way of you to come to here and sort of say, this is the way forward. We're not going to actually just deal with a few. We're going to make sure that we cover everyone's needs and support them on the way. So I was excited by it. Thank you, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Norma. And you know what? I think this really echoes the report that Councillor Seymour was talking about earlier about co-design and co-production, because this is the way that we stop people experiencing exactly what you described there, Norma, of falling through the gaps. I've never believed in trickle down as an idea, that a rising tide lifts all boats. What happens is the people without yachts drown when the tide comes in. And it's about protecting people and getting everybody involved, because actually that's what makes us all richer in the end anyway. So on the specific thing, it seems to me entirely sensible that we delegate the authority to change personnel on the board mid-year, because the chances of everybody's careers and lives and other activities timing with our AGM framework are pretty slim. So let's keep it flexible, because that's the best way to get people involved. Can't see anyone else indicating. So 3 recommendations there. One is to note the progress of the Inclusive Economy Innovation Fund and the Inclusive Economy Board. And I would just add to that, to not only note it, but to commend it. Can we agree that? Thank you. To approve the new nominated members as indicated in paragraph 1.7, which Karen covered, which I can see people nodding, so that's agreed. And then to delegate the authority to make in-year changes as described there in consultation with the Economy Board Chair, who's Bishop Christine, and the Vice Chair, who's Karen. So that's agreed. Yes, thank you very much. So this moves us on to not a decision, but a report, and this is the Q1 Budget Monitoring Report, and I'll hand over straight over to our Chief Financial Officer, Janice Gillespie.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, as the Mayor says, this is the first quarter's monitoring report to Cabinet for 21-22. Just some key highlights to set out for Cabinet. In terms of corporate budget, the spend is forecast to mainly be online for the year. A small variation in staffing resources, which was funded through the work stream work, some of which you've seen in earlier reports today. The investment fund, what you see there is the spend starting to come through now, so decisions made over the last couple of years, we're starting to see the cash actually go out of the door. So we are anticipating spend in line with budget, and that will mean you'll start to see us using some of the reserves from previous years in terms of the funding the authorities received. The Brownfield Land Programme, that will catch up a bit during 21-22. Obviously, late notification during last year meant it was a bit of a challenge to get the money out of the door, but we expect to see that start to catch up. And then adult education budget, absolutely in line at the moment with expectations. So no issues to report through to Cabinet. It's obviously the first report of the year. We'll continue to monitor and update as appropriate.
Thank you very much, Janice. You know, it's wonderful to be in a position as an elected politician where you can say we're breaking all our targets and we're doing it under budget. And I wish I could take all the credit for it personally, but it's not. We've got a fantastic staff team. Notable that we're actually under budget on employees. So just to all of the team, I know how hard you're working through, you know, what are very difficult circumstances. So thank you to everybody. Has anybody got any questions on this report? No. So the recommendation is, of course, to note the forecast budget monitoring position as set out in the paragraphs and the reserve position in 1.6. Is that agreed? Thank you. This takes us on to item 12. For the benefit of anybody watching on the live stream, the relationship between the North East Local Enterprise Partnership, which people will generally refer to as the LEP, and the North of Tyne Combined Authority is we are not the LEP. We are the what's called the accountable body for the LEP. Because of our legal status, we eventually have to kind of sign off their things, but we don't make those decisions. Although it's slightly complicated, that local authority leaders and myself are also members of the LEP. So that's hopefully cleared it as much as mud. But that's the reason why we have on this item the partnership funding decisions update for the North East Local Enterprise Partnership, and I'll pass that straight to Janice.
Thank you, Chair. Not a great deal to add, actually. What you have in this report is a list of all the approvals that the LEP Board have taken since the 26th of January through to the end of June. So absolutely, as accountable body, I'm involved in that process with the LEP, absolutely. So this just gives you an overall record of those decisions that have been entered into.
Thank you, Janice. And all of that's available in the public reports pack, should anybody want to have a look at it. And I can't see anybody indicating to ask any specific questions about this report.
Chair?
Oh, I can now. Richard, yes.
I think probably just to thank you, Chairman, just to say what a good job the LEP's been doing. I was fortunate enough to sit in on a meeting the other day, and there's a really lot of exciting and interesting stuff going on. There was a fantastic report in particular on the sort of the skills gap, or how we can make sure that we have some of that inclusive growth that is so critical to everything that we're wanting to achieve here as a combined authority. So it's probably worthy of note to just say thank you in particular to our LEP colleagues.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, and the LEP, I mean, obviously it does the investments and things in the report, but it's also worth noting the good job it does in terms of convening around the region. So, for example, earlier today on the Transport for the North Board, Lucy's also on that, and we're doing a lot of work on climate change and other things together as well. So they are absolutely key partners. Thank you. So the recommendation there is just to note the report as described, and that's since the last time this was covered on the 26th of January, and I can see the nods of agreement there. Thank you. Well, that's taken us through our public business. So the date and time of the next meeting is 2 p.m. on the 22nd of September later this year, and the venue will be announced in due course. And with that, because there is one commercially confidential item to discuss, just ask Cabinet to agree the resolution. Section 100A and Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, because exempt information is likely to be disclosed and the public interest test against disclosure is satisfied. Thank you. So is that agreed by Cabinet? Thank you. So we'll just pause for a moment and end the live stream. Thank you.